The alarm clock screamed at 3 a.m., a jagged, relentless sound that sliced through the stillness of the apartment. Elias jolted upright, his chest heaving. His joints popped like dry kindling as he swung his legs off the edge of the mattress. Cold air bit at his skin, but he did not shiver. He was already moving. He stumbled into the kitchen, his feet finding the familiar path across the linoleum without needing light. He splashed cold water on his face, staring into the cracked mirror above the sink. His eyes were red-rimmed, heavy with a fatigue that no amount of sleep could touch. He checked the clock on the wall. 40 minutes until his first shift at the industrial bakery. He pulled on his boots, the leather worn thin at the heels, and tightened the laces until his fingers ached. Every movement was mechanical, a series of calculated steps designed to save time. He grabbed his thermos, checked the lock on the front door, and stepped out into the dark. The streetlights flickered in the silence, mirroring the rhythmic, heavy thud of his own heartbeat. Another day had begun, and he had no margin for error. The bakery heat clung to his skin, a thick layer of flour and sweat that coated his throat. He punched out at 11 a.m., the industrial timer clicking with finality. He did not pause to wipe the dust from his arms. He moved through the back alley, his boots crunching over discarded pallets, heading toward the shipping yard 2 blocks away. The transition was sharp. The scent of yeast and scorched sugar vanished, replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of diesel fumes and sea salt. He reached the gate, checked in with a nod, and walked toward the rows of towering metal containers. His muscles felt tight, the kind of stiffness that comes from hours of repetitive heavy motion. He took a bottle of water from his bag, drained it in 3 long gulps, and tossed the empty plastic into the bin. There was no transition time, no moment to sit or breathe. A foreman shouted from the loading dock, gesturing toward a stack of pallets. Elias walked toward the sound, his legs heavy, his mind already calculating the weight of the next load. The day was only half finished, but the pressure was already mounting, a constant, low-level hum of necessity driving him forward. The first crate hit the loading bay with a heavy, hollow thud. Elias gripped the rough wooden edges, his fingers digging into the splinters. He hauled the weight toward the steel container, his back muscles screaming in protest. A dull fire ignited in his shoulders, spreading downward with every step. He paused, bracing his legs against the vibration of the dock. Suddenly, the crate shifted, sliding toward the left. He slammed his weight against the wood, veins bulging in his neck, and forced it back into alignment. The effort sent a sharp, white-hot sting through his spine. He breathed through it, eyes fixed on the rusted latch of the container. He wasn't moving boxes. He was moving numbers. Every crate represented a fraction of the academy tuition. He calculated the cost in his head, breaking the massive sum down into pounds of cargo. Each lift was a transaction. Each hour of strain was a deposit into an account he would never see, but one that would secure a different life for his son. He shoved the crate inside, wiped the grit from his forehead, and turned back to the stack. The fire in his shoulders remained, but he ignored the burn, stepping forward to claim the next load. The hospital lobby was silent, a stark white cavern compared to the chaotic noise of the shipping yard. Elias pushed the floor buffer across the linoleum, the machine a low, constant drone that vibrated through his arms. He did not look at the patients or the staff. He looked at the floor. With every pass, he mentally subtracted the hourly wage from the remaining balance of the academy tuition. He knew the figure to the exact cent. It was a terrifying, precise number. He stopped the machine near a row of plastic chairs to refill his bucket. The clock on the wall read 2 a.m. He had 5 hours left. 5 hours equaled a specific set of textbooks. 6 hours equaled the laboratory fees. He dipped the mop into the soapy water, the liquid dark and swirling, and began again. His movements were automated, stripped of all wasted effort. He wasn't cleaning a floor, he was dismantling a barrier. He counted the tiles, each one a step closer to the final payment. The ache in his shoulders from the day's earlier labor was still there, but he ignored it. His focus locked on the mental ledger that demanded his endurance until the sun rose. Elias stepped through the front door, the silence of the apartment heavy after the hospital's drone. He found Leo at the kitchen table, surrounded by a sprawl of copper wire and circuit boards. The boy was hunched over a dismantled radio, his fingers moving with a speed that blurred. A small spark hissed from the device, and the cooling fans stalled. Leo did not flinch. He grabbed a pair of pliers, bypassed a fried capacitor, and resoldered the connection in one fluid motion. The fan hummed back to life, steady and rhythmic. Elias watched from the doorway, his own hands aching from the night's work. The boy was not just tinkering, he was building a transmitter capable of long-range signals that could bridge the gap between their narrow world and the wider one. Leo adjusted a dial, and the radio crackled with clear, distant static. It was a fortress of opportunity, a complex architecture of logic that Elias was funding with every drop of his sweat. The boy looked up, his eyes bright with the thrill of the breakthrough. He held out the device, a testament to the future Elias was buying. Every hour spent scrubbing floors was manifested here, in the cold precision of wires and the brilliant, unspoken promise of what Leo would become. The cumulative weight of 3 years finally breached the surface. It was a Tuesday. The air in the hospital hallway thick with the smell of antiseptic. Elias stood in the center of the lobby, preparing to lift the heavy industrial bucket. He gripped the handle, his fingers locking into place as they had 1,000 times before. But the signal from his brain did not reach his grip. His right hand spasmed, the fingers twitched, a rapid, erratic rhythm that he could not command. He stared at his hand, watching the knuckles dance with a life of their own. He tried to tighten his hold, but the nerves misfired, sending a jolt of sharp, electric pain up his forearm. His grip slackened. The metal handle slipped, clattering against the plastic rim of the bucket. He shook his hand out, slamming it against his thigh, trying to force the muscles to obey. The tremor persisted, a rhythmic pulsing that mocked his desperate need for stability. He looked around the lobby, heart hammering against his ribs, fearing someone had witnessed the lapse. The silence of the hall felt heavy, suffocating. He realized, with a jolt of cold clarity, that his body was beginning to betray the very schedule that kept their future alive. He took a breath, forced his fingers to curl, and reached for the bucket once more. The handle felt slick. Elias tried to compensate for the tremor by locking his elbow, but the muscle betrayed him. His hand jerked violently, and the bucket tipped. It hit the floor with a deafening, metallic clang that echoed through the empty lobby. Gallons of gray, soapy water surged outward, soaking the floor in a wide, spreading pool. Elias lunged to catch it, but he stumbled, his boots sliding on the wet surface. He scrambled to regain his balance, his heart racing as he looked at the ruin of his work. A door swung open at the end of the hall. The night supervisor marched toward him, footsteps clicking sharply against the tile. The man stopped at the edge of the spill, his eyes scanning the mess, then fixing on Elias with a cold, narrow gaze. The supervisor pointed at the bucket, then at the exit. "This is the 3rd time this week, Elias. You are a liability. One more mistake and you are finished here." Elias stood frozen, water dripping from his cuffs. The threat hung in the air, heavier than the exhaustion in his bones. If he lost this shift, the academy tuition would vanish. He looked at the supervisor, his mouth dry, unable to find the words to defend his own failing nerves. Elias did not offer excuses. He lowered his head, his chin touching his chest, and sank to his knees in the soapy water. He grabbed the coarse brush with both hands, his fingers screaming in protest as he pressed them against the rough bristles. He pushed. The brush moved in rhythmic, jagged arcs across the linoleum. With every pass, the friction burned his skin. He did not look up at the supervisor. He looked down at the floor, picturing the intricate schematics Leo drew in the margins of his school books. He saw the complex circuitry of solar arrays, the precise lines of a transmitter, the architecture of a future that existed only in his mind. The brush snagged on a stubborn scuff mark. He applied more pressure, his weight shifting forward until his knuckles struck the floor. The skin tore. A thin, dark line of blood mixed with the gray soap, creating a smear across the pristine tiles. He did not stop. He scrubbed harder, the physical pain serving as an anchor against the exhaustion. He was not just cleaning a hospital lobby. He was sanding away the obstacles standing between his son and the academy. His breath came in ragged, shallow hitches, but his hands continued their work, driven by the singular burning need to secure the next payment. The final payment cleared on a Tuesday, just as the sun began to dip behind the city skyline. Elias walked home, his gait slow, his body still reacting to the rhythm of the floor scrubbing machine that had defined his nights for years. He reached the apartment, turned the key in the lock, and pushed the door open. The air inside was still. He walked to the kitchen and set his heavy work bag down on the linoleum. It did not make the usual thud. The sound felt hollow, final. On the small coffee table in the center of the room, a single envelope rested. It was thick, cream-colored, and bore the official seal of the Technical Academy. Elias stopped. He stared at the paper. For 3 years, his world had been measured in hourly wages, hospital shifts, and the calculated cost of every meal. Now, that math was finished. He pulled out the chair and sat down, his movements stiff and deliberate. The letter sat between them, a silent bridge between the life he had carved out of exhaustion and the one Leo was about to step into. He did not reach for it yet. He simply watched the light from the window crawl across the paper, marking the end of the long road. Leo finally broke the silence. He reached across the table, his fingers tracing the jagged, pale scars that mapped the back of his father's hands. He saw the tremor that still rippled through the knuckles, a lingering echo of the endless, heavy lifting. Elias watched him. He saw the way Leo's eyes moved over the rough skin, not with pity, but with a sudden, sharp understanding of the cost behind the letter on the table. Leo pressed his own palm over his father's, steadying the shaking hand. Elias looked down at the union of their skin, the contrast between the boy's smooth palm and his own ruined grip. For the first time in 10 years, he did not glance at the clock on the wall. He did not calculate the next shift or the next debt. He felt the tension in his shoulders snap like a frayed wire. He let out a long, slow breath that seemed to pull the stiffness from his spine. The weight that had defined his existence for a decade dissolved. He looked at Leo, then back at the letter, and finally leaned back into the sofa, closing his eyes. He had nothing left to do. He was finally, completely, still.